Good afternoon. My name is Leonardo Figueroa. I'm Associate Professor of Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management at the New School. My pronouns are he, him, le, él, and it is truly an honor to welcome you to the People's Climate Week. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Leonardo Figueroa, profesor asociado de Política Ambiental y Sustentabilidad en el New School. Mis pronombres son él, le, he, him y él. Y es un verdadero honor darles la bienvenida a la Semana del Clima de los Pueblos. Seems we lost the slideshow back there. I didn't do anything. Is there somebody in?
This is why you cannot trust technology.
There we go. All right, before we get started with this event, I will provide some guidance concerning the interpretation and other logistical matters. We're providing interpretation into Spanish only for the Zoom audience online. So I'm going to speak in Spanish in order to explain the interpretation for the Zoom audience. Instrucciones para interpretación al español disponibles solamente en línea vía Zoom. Si usted está conectándose a este evento vía Zoom para escuchar la interpretación al español, oprima el símbolo del mundo en la pantalla a la derecha de la parte inferior de su ventana de Zoom y oprima español. Muchas gracias a nuestra intérprete Cassandra. El vínculo Zoom se puede acceder registrándose a este evento vía el calendario de eventos del New School en el vínculo web de event.newschool.edu, / a People's Climate Week 1. Now I will also notify that we're live streaming and recording this event. So this event is being recorded and broadcasted live in the YouTube channel of the Tishman Environment and Design Center and the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch of the Indigenous Environmental Network in English and the social media of Grassroots Global Justice Alliance in Spanish. If you're connected via Zoom, please keep your microphone on mute. Vamos a retransmitir en directo y grabar. Este evento está siendo grabado y transmitido en vivo vía el canal de YouTube del Tishman Environment and Design Center y las páginas de Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch del Indigenous Environmental Network en inglés y en español a través de Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. Si nos sintoniza vía Zoom, por favor mantenga su micrófono en mute. A partir de este momento voy a comenzar a hablar solamente en inglés. Así que, por favor, si usted nos está viendo vía Zoom, por favor, oprima el símbolo del mundo a la derecha de la parte inferior de la pantalla y oprima español. For those of you joining us in person, please turn off or mute your cell phones and see towards the center of the auditorium. Ensure when you register outside, ensure you have obtained a wristband at the entrance of the auditorium so you can move in and out of the auditorium and into the courtyard of the building for the social mingling segment of the event to be held at the courtyard and cafe located to the auditorium on my left-hand side over there. All right. Milio shuke, shaltik, milio shuke, ansetik, viniketik, metiketik, totetik, sebetik, kremetik, takotolik, kuavelanik. Bone Hakbi, Leonardo Figueroa Heland. Likemonta Alta, Mesoamérica, Nahuac, México, Tenochtitlan. Nakalon Tat, Lenapejokin, Chiaptec, Chavit, Takchamvun, Tamilano School, Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management at the New School. I hereby greet you, companions, all of you, women, men, elders, youth, all of you present. How is everybody doing today? Woo! I'm an arrivant from the Central Valley of Mexico, Tenochtitlan, in unceded Lenape land, Lenapejoking. I am currently a professor of environmental policy and sustainability management at the New School, and my work centers on indigenous and decolonizing approaches to climate justice and systemic change. So it's truly an honor to open this space for the movements to speak in their own voices and to advance an agenda for the People's Climate Week. I want to thank all of our co-organizers and co-sponsors, primarily the organizers of this People's Climate Week, It Takes Root Coalition, including the Indigenous Environmental Network, Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, Climate Justice Alliance, Just Transition Alliance, the Black Hive, Indigenous Climate Action, This Is Rising Up and Moving, and World March of Women. Thanks to all of those who made this possible, including Candy White, Jaron Brown, Brenna Tubers, Daisy Francoeur, Donna Chai, Elisa Soto Danseco, Tom Goldtooth, Jose Bravo, Vineshi Albert, Michelle Wright, Annalisa Cabelles, Esteban Arenas Pino, Tamara Gilbertson, among many others. I also want to thank the New School team, Laura Langner, Kier Blake, Vancello, Kate Tooley, Orpheus Scutelis, Mark Fitzpatrick, among others. So welcome to the People's Climate Week. Today we hold a launch plenary in this auditorium, and this plenary is followed by a movement social in the courtyard and the cafe in the same building. Tomorrow we will hold a teach-in and a movement assembly in the same venue. Over the course of these 2 days, we bring together climate activists, mobilizing to New York Climate Week in alignment with Frontline Climate Justice grassroots movement leadership. These timely gatherings are led by grassroots frontline, Indigenous, Black, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, Arab, and South Asian organizers. The space gathers to advance a people's agenda for climate and environmental justice, focused on movement building and strategic visioning to confront false solutions and advance systemic change. This is a space where we can learn from each other and build on the insights from frontline leaders from Nigeria to Brazil and across Turtle Island, leading just transition solutions, guided by decolonization, grassroots feminism, indigenous sovereignty, the defense of human rights, and climate reparations. This People's Climate Week will also serve as a counter space to mainstream New York City Climate Week events. Here, movements advance the people's agenda for real alternatives as interventions that disrupt the promotion of false solutions to climate change, including hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, climate geoengineering, engineered tree plantations and other techno fixes, as well as liquefied natural gas and carbon markets and offsets, among others. All such false solutions are being advanced by corporate, governmental, and big green NGOs during Climate Week and in the UN Ambition Summit. And we need to be alert to how they are also being advanced in the upcoming United Nations Conference of the Parties. Frontline movements and organizers advance, in contrast, alternative, real solutions about which we will learn and share in this space. Also, I want to proceed first by acknowledging that the New School stands on unceded Lenape land, which is Lenape-Hoking. It is and continues to be the ancestral land of the indigenous peoples, and like many indigenous peoples, both in their lands and diasporic indigenous peoples continue to struggle to defend, reclaim, and rematriate their ancestral lands, which had been dispossessed by settler colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, and other forces that have violently disrupted indigenous lifeways. I want to make sure that we honor the youth, elders, past, present, and future, who have accumulated and nurtured indigenous knowledge that is place-based and that has maintained the biocultural diversity and richness of the landscapes on which life depends. I also want to acknowledge the connected histories of dispossession of Black people and their forced removal from Africa to work as forced laborers in Turtle Island. The struggles of indigenous liberation and Black abolition are tied together in the creation of decolonial futures. As we gather in the New School, we want to make sure that we don't just acknowledge the presence of indigenous people and the demands of justice, but that we commit institutionally to open spaces and take actions to the advancement of justice, decolonization, and abolition. It is for that and many other reasons that we open up these spaces. Now, for this session, it is for that and many reasons that I am honored to stand here next to our distinguished speakers from whom we will learn so much. Tom Goldtooth from the Indigenous Environmental Network, Nimo Bassi from Health of Mother Earth Foundation, Claudien Florencio, President of the Association of Pataxó Indigenous Women in Brazil, Kali Akuno from Cooperation Jackson and Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, Raya Salter from the Black Hive and Energy Justice Policy and Law Center, and Crystal Tuples from Honor the Earth. We're also, it's a pleasure to have as MCs Candy White from the Indigenous Environmental Network and Margaret Kwateng from Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. I want to I want to pass the mic over to our MC, Candy White, who will carry us for the rest of the night.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Give it up for Leo, everybody. Thank you, Leo from the new school. All right, and just want to acknowledge and continue on as to what Leo was saying. And so we have a brilliant young up-and-coming leader here who represents the youth and represents the people of the land. And so please join me in welcoming and bringing to the stage at the time, Sage. Come on up.
Can you hear me? Okay. Sago Zarguego, Garaquineta Yajats, what's Gardewaged, and Agahnawage Ganagade. Hi everyone, my name is Garaquineta. I'm from the Bear clans of Gahnawage, and I'm also Taos Pueblo. And we're gonna start with the Hondu Guardia Wadakwa, which is the words before all else. So I'm just gonna invite everyone to take a few deep breaths with me. We'll take 3 and then we'll get into the prayer. All right, so Ganjakwa, so the Masios Ganigari Wasanega, the Hondugardi Wadakwa, Ona Hetstu. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Nguesu, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, Yukinstahan, the Ohandade, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, Gatnigarunu, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, John Heck, when it also the good Gata, honest on it was a red than it was a head, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, Onunqua Sua, Negadine, Gatni Ondessa, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, Gundirio, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, Gari was Sua, Danu, or Dera Sua. Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. The Tinuhara, the Ne, Odida Angua, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, Yustahanti Ohandade, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Negayeri Nigawarage, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, Yukistatat, Iskatatota, Adutaneka Garakwa, Togadina Yat, and Aguatnigora. Aguego Aska, the Watmanuni Dani, the Tinuhara, the Ne, Sungwaya Dizu. Tony on Wanna then Technohotas at Nigorna easy gain and 0 Namakoa. Then you Tony on Wanna get a Hondugardi Wadakwa. So I'm going to do a brief translation. So essentially what the Hondugardi Wadakwa stands for is our relationship to land and how connected we are together. So in this elements, we give thanks to each element of the land. So the roots, the land, the waters, the fish, the plant life, everything. And we have to acknowledge those relationships, or else who are we as Ungwehua, the original peoples of those lands? We're intrinsically connected to the land, and our natural laws are embedded into us because they're embedded into the land. And as we walk this land, they're embedded, and we just have to make sure we stand for that, because we can't represent the land if we don't stand for the land. And it's important that we do that because we're the next 7th generation and we're fighting for that. And what that means is if we don't see the change that we want to see in the next 7 generations, like we need to do it now. And it's for our grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, the children after that. So I just want to open that, and then saying that we have to use a Gatnigordio, which means a good mind. And in that we have our heart and soul, and we're just making the best of it. So, Nyamakoa.
Awesome. So Dosha Maragoet, Marashima A Ishiwiya Hets. Hello relatives, my name is Eagle Woman. I am a citizen of the Mandan Heradza Arikara Nations in so-called North Dakota. And I am here representing on behalf of everybody back home. Hello, everybody back home, but also the Indigenous Environmental Network. So very honored to be here with a very powerful panel of speakers, and for the next few days, everybody for tomorrow. So make sure you come back tomorrow. There's going to be more in-depth conversations that will be happening as well. And I want to go ahead and have Margaret introduce herself as well as the co-MC as well before we get started and before I introduce Tom. So go ahead, Margaret.
Great. Thank you so much, Candy.
You're welcome.
So my name is Margaret Quatten, and I'm the national campaign organizer at Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. And I'm really excited to be here today and to be co-emceeing with Candy Mossett, who I remember distinctly watching a documentary on the Paris Climate Accords, and Candy being surrounded by all of this press and really shouting out the struggle back home and how fracking had impacted your communities. And I think that was one of the moments in which I really was understanding the deep impacts of climate justice. So I'm really grateful and honored to be hosting this with you. And then to be a part of this larger panel with you all, and with part of It Takes Roots, which is just an incredible alignment of multicultural, multiracial, intergenerational organizations and alignments from around the country who are really fighting for a better world and on the front lines. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Candy to do our first introduction and pass it to our first speaker.
Nice. Give it up for Margaret, everybody. Woo! Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you know, Leo did a really good job, but it really is like, why are we here? All this stuff is going down in New York. What is this Climate Ambition Summit? What is this Climate Week? One of the reasons we're here is because there is a lot of false solutions that are being pushed to the climate crisis. What does that mean? That's what we're going to get into a little bit here today. And so with that, I want to introduce our first speaker. Some of you may have heard of his name before, Tom BK Goldtooth. He is an environmental activist, economic justice activist, speaker, film producer, and Indigenous rights leader. He is active in local, national, and international levels as an advocate for building healthy and sustainable Indigenous communities based upon the foundation of Indigenous traditional knowledge. I have to slow down. We are language justice. More than that, you know, Tom is the executive director of the Indigenous Environmental Network. He's also a mentor. He's also a person that I've had the privilege of working with for almost 17 years. And Tom really cares. He's dedicated his life to this movement. And I just appreciate the time that he's taken to share his knowledge as an elder now and leader in our movement to teach not only the history of the seventh generations behind us, but the ones that come, because if we don't know where we came from, how are we going to know where we're going? Tom has helped facilitate that for me and a lot of other natives around the world and Indigenous peoples. And I just really, really appreciate you being here today, Tom. And with that, we'll turn it over to you. No pressure, but please join me in welcoming Mr. Tom Goldtooth.
Thank you. Thank you, Candy. I'm kind of figuring out, I'm going to stand there, I'm going to stand here, or was I going to sit down? But hello, everyone. Haumitakiapi. Yat the best Jini, Nanshli. Woto Kota Bashishichi. I'm Petu Kade. Chante Washtea I Yuha. Na pe Chiyuzapato. I said words in both my Dene, Navajo, my clan, and also I introduced the greetings in our Eastern Dakota, the Badewa Kantawa. From the goodness of my heart, my nape, I shake your hands, every one of you. Many of you who are part of the land, you are indigenous. You've been taught your own way of greeting. It's very critical on that, and I appreciate and give thanks to our daughter, our niece, our sister. I don't know if she's an auntie yet, but she is part of our new formation of Train the Trainers, to be able to speak and work with our people back home. Many tribal nation reservations to talk about some of the mitigation the plans, the solutions that the governments of the world and the polluting industry and the world banks and investments, banks like JP Morgan Chase, for an example, who are investing in false solutions that don't cut emissions at source. It's a scam. But we need more information, and we need our young people and all ages to learn more about this so that they can talk in front of our leadership, but also our grassroots, our traditional leaders, our spiritual leaders. So I just want to give recognition. And to start out and to be present, we put an altar here together, kind of like, I don't want to say intertribal, but it's an altar that has the water of life, and it has tobacco. Some of that is handmade tobacco from the medicine, the plants. Some of it is store-bought tobacco, and then some other medicines for smudge. But this is very critical. I want to give that as a foundation as we have come together, multicultural, building a movement of reclaiming our power. And the organizations that have come together to be able to do this ITR, it takes roots, to recognize the roots of the many different cultures of this country. We've been under attack for hundreds of years, not only as indigenous, as you know, but our relatives that have come here from Africa, our relatives that come here from Asia, Southeast Asia, Pacific Islanders, our people that come from the South. From the South, it's a mixture of our indigenous people and Spanish people, mestizo. Many of them are coming back to their indigenous teachings. So we've been confronted, we're confronting racism, patriarchy, even systems that downplay the role of our women being a basis of our traditional economies. So this is a movement of building our power to reclaim. It's not easy. So as we have come here to stand in the streets, or to speak up like this, or to speak in other circles, or even to be invited to the UN Secretary General so-called Ambition Climate Summit. I was invited at the last minute, so I'm going to go in there Wednesday. But these are things that we have to come together. So I appreciate the people who are here and the many other listening. We have to continue to build our power. For those that want to have strategy to go into a UN system, and we stepped in there, many of us here, knowing what it means. What it means when the financial and investment institutions are there. The polluting corporations and all the corporate power, and the governments and the wealthy governments of the North playing off of the developing countries of the South. Talk about inequities, talk about colonialism. Yes, it's real. So we have to come together very strategic, and that's what we're doing. And I can stand here and say that what is lauded leadership that's been planning this, and many others, that's what we've been doing. But also at the same time, looking at alternatives and building our power to bring people of the world together, civil society, people from local communities. And that's happening as well. Our own global people's convening. That has to continue. Because that other system out there, that matrix is powerful. I recognize that. As indigenous peoples, we've been advocating where we come from and the importance of ceremony. That is our number one power. As indigenous people, if we assimilate ourselves, or acculturate ourselves, then we may become like them, buy into capitalism, buy into our corporations, buy into mechanisms like carbon trading, cap and trade, and all that money they're promising a lot of our Black, Indigenous people of color communities right now, buying us out. That's where we're building power and having teach-ins, we're having sessions and webinars like this, which is very important. That foundation for us is on our indigenous, our traditional indigenous knowledge. That has to be the foundation. Inside the UN, they're already trying to co-op and say, we need your traditional indigenous knowledge because your people have been living in the forests, in the Amazon and the tropics, and you've been taking care of the forests for hundreds of years, thousands of years, so we're going to pay you for taking care of your forests. We're going to pay you now to count the trees so we can inventory the trees on how much carbon is there. That's the hook. Large NGOs that we have to stand strong and fight against. That whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans or a third party, they listen to large white environmental NGOs. Globally too. So we're fighting this fight at every level. They're keeping labor against us, against each other. We have to fight for reparation, both indigenous people as our inherent rights, but also to stand with people of color and our Black relatives who've been promised reparation in this country, but nothing has come out yet. And now reparations as far as loss and damage in the global South. So we're coming together strategically, and how do we do this? How do we do this? Addressing the inequity in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, addressing financing and funding. We have these reports. In my final comments, go to our website. You can find reports where we have analyzed this. A lot of these issues around nature-based solutions, issues of finance and funding and inequities in that, the role of agriculture, and we even did a final analysis of the U.S. IRA funding legislation. So my final minute is what we're lifting up. I just came from a convening on rights of nature with the Global Alliance on Rights of Nature, which is a movement as well, on how we're strengthening and building a role of indigenous people in this broader movement that is Eurocentric, and we're changing that then, though, with the power of indigenous peoples, to strengthen that by them recognizing that we have inherent rights, we have relationship, and we have indigenous jurisprudence. Very critical in our movement of building our power to address these issues in climate, environmental justice issues, economic justice, and having this foundation. It's very important as we also challenge them on the governance issues. The governance issues. We're not represented whether it's a governance issues in Canada and US or whether it's in Ecuador, or whether it's our indigenous tribal peoples in the continent of Africa. So these are things that are very important. We are also part of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty as we're standing with the indigenous peoples of the Pacific. So with that said, I'm glad to be one of the speakers, just to give some context of this movement of struggle, but we are winning. We are winning here and there. We have to recognize those wins in this bigger battle of war against the people of the land. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Really, I think lifting up a lot of the necessary, we're lifting up the need for ancestral knowledge, the need for our solutions to be in the halls of where decisions are made. One of the incredible things about working with grassroots organizations, about working with frontline communities to fight the climate crisis, is that we understand that our fight is about multiple generations from now, absolutely. And it is also about our lives right now. When the farmland is too arid to farm, when our water is too poisoned to drink, and when our countries are being ravaged by war over resources, these are all the fights that we're living through right now. And it is our next speaker who really understands this connection. So I want to introduce Nimo Basi, who is coming, shout out to Nimo Basi, all the way here from Nigeria, who is a part of the Health of Mother Earth Foundation and on the steering committee of Oil Watch International. And he has written many books, many articles, spoken in many locations about this connection, and has an incredible book called We Thought It Was Oil, But It Was Blood. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Nimo. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. At the point, I thought you were reciting a poem, you know. You say, when our land is poisoned, our water is poisoned, our air is poisoned. Ken Saro-Wiwa, who inspired me into being an activist, said in those words that if those things happened, then silence is treason. In other words, we all have a duty to speak up against environmental degradation in whatever form, whatever shape, wherever it happens. He lost his life because of the struggle, but you can kill the messenger, but you can never kill the idea. The message lives on. And so thank you so much for inviting me. I feel like truly I'm part of the family. I always feel totally comfortable when I'm with my brother Tom, a man of wisdom. And thank you for laying that out, before. Now, what I'm going to do in the next 1 hour that I have, what I'm going to do is to share some ideas with you about what we call the eco-social pact of the Global South. This is because there's been so much debates on climate change. Every year we're going to have the 28th Conference of Polluters in United Arab Emirates at the end of November this year. So for 28 years, there have been conferences, and the real issue, each year, the whole debate is to avoid the question, to avoid taking climate action. That is what the conference is about. It's not about solving the problem, it's about how to avoid, how to escape responsibility. And so every year there's less and less emphasis on justice. In fact, in the document that came out of Glasgow, COP26, yes, they said that when they mention climate justice, they put in brackets, which matters to some. In other words, it doesn't matter to everybody. And so it's actually inconsequential, but they know that what is going on is criminal. And in fact, every oil pit and every pipeline is a crime scene. And so we need to tackle them as crimes against humanity, crimes against nature, and crimes against other beings that we may not be aware of. Because every being has a right to live where nature, where Mother Earth has put them. Now, why do we have this crisis? You saw yesterday in the march, almost every block, every group had a sign that fossil fuels must be left in the ground. I said, leave the oil in the soil, leave the coal in the hole, and don't even talk about the tar sands. And so the struggle has been on. We've been talking about this for 30 years from the early 90s, when it was like a stupid idea. How could you say leave the oil in the soil? Now everyone is saying it. And so when you have an idea you know is correct, it doesn't matter what anybody says. Hold on to it. One day they'll wake up from their nightmare to see that what you said was correct. So the question is, how come virtually everyone knows what needs to be done, but nothing is being done? When I say everyone, I mean those in political power, the industries. It's because we're running a broken system. the capitalist economic system thrives on expansion, socioeconomic expansion, continuous expansion, and that expansion is built on extractivism. And so that means expand the sacrifice zones. It's a colonial idea. In the colonialism means extract resources from a particular place for somewhere else. It's never for the place where the resource is found. And so we don't blame the, people. Some people say the resources are a cause, oil is a cause to Nigeria, where I come from, but it's not true. You don't blame the resources belong to nature. Nature put them where they were put. They were not, you don't extract everything just because you've got it. Just like you don't use every technology you have. We have the atomic bomb. Why don't we blow atomic bombs every day? You drop one somewhere, drop another one, but because we know that even though we have it, we don't have to use it. And so, number one thing is that the expansionist economic system is not sustainable. And we have to be ready to be inconvenienced in order to be able to change that system. Now, the dirty energy industry, the fossil fuel industry is well known. I don't need to tell you about it, but let me just say in the few minutes I have, let me give you a handle to it, what it means, where I come from. In 2011, the United Nations Environment Programme issued a report on the assessment of the Ogoni environment. Ogoni is a small subsection of the Niger Delta in Nigeria. And they said in some places, if all the water bodies are contaminated by crude oil, then in some places, the groundwater was found to have benzene, a carcinogen, 900 times above World Health Standards. Now, and the pollution in some places in the soil had gone as deep as 5 meters. Some years later, when it was being excavated, the areas were being excavated, it has gone as deep as 10 meters. For every year you leave a pollution, the worse it gets. Now, a few months ago, another report was issued, which shows that in a particular region in my country, there's a per capita contamination of 1.5 barrels of crude oil per person, of course. 1.5, but imagine each of you having 1.5 barrels of oil poured on you. And then someone tells you that you have a benefit from that resource. You're not only being polluted, you're also having the consequences of climate change. Coastal communities being washed away. The map of the world is changing. The map we have today in 10 years' time will be different. Because the coastlines are washing away by sea level rise. And all the floods we're having. Those who will be around maybe in some years to come, let me not mention the years so that you don't get frightened. They will pick up the map of the world in 2023, and they will say, oh my God, so this city was here. What happened to it? It's global warming. Right. So the key thing is that we have a duty to stand together, to fight together against the expansion of sacrifice zones. We have to defend our land, defend our life. And it is not enough to say we are going to decarbonize the environment, the economy. Decarbonize what? We have to depetrolize the economy. We have to put an end to the petroleum civilization and begin to understand that many civilizations have come and gone. And this one, we have to bring it to an end so that we can live healthy lives. So as I round up, let me pay tribute to our relatives in Ecuador, who on August 20 voted against extraction of oil in Yasuni. Now, very solid signal to show the world that this can be done. I know the politicians have said that they're not going to respect that vote, but they have to be compelled to obey that vote, the voice of the people. In 1993, the Ogoni people expelled Shell Oil Company from Ogoni land. And as I speak to you, not one oil well has been reopened. So it can be done. It can be done. They don't have to reject all four solutions because those are all energy colonialism. Like you hear today, they talk about critical energy, critical minerals. You transiting from dirty energy to clean energy by extracting minerals without responsibility. And so there are communities that are already suffering from the extraction of cobalt, extraction of lithium, all those things. You make beautiful energy equipment, but what happens to the communities where this is being done, where this is being extracted? So our campaign against extractivism is not only against the extraction of crude oil, about every form of mining. And we say yes to life and no to mining. I could speak on for the next 10 hours. But let me pause it so that we can listen to the wisdom of my sisters and all of you who are going to contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nemo. Give it up again for Nemo Basi, everybody, traveling from Nigeria. Just a quick announcement that we will be having questions and answers. And so if you didn't get a white card from the front table, please write down questions you might have for our speakers. We do have 2 people that are going through and collecting the questions so that we can ask them at the end of the panel. Adrian, Randy, where are you? Make yourselves known. Maybe you're sitting outside. To be able to get your questions to them, write them down if you have something for our panelists, okay? Good. Adrian, stand up. There's Adrian, everybody. Look for Adrian. You can pass your cards to Adrian. All right. And so I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, and Kandara. I just learned the traditional name, so appreciate that very much. Kandara is from the extreme south of the Baha'i state in Brazil, near Porto Seguro. Kandara is an activist against female violence in all levels, an activist of the Papachal territories, and an environmental activist. And I really just appreciate traveling here to share the message and the story, and also for teaching me how to pronounce correctly Portuguese. And so we will have the next Kandara will be speaking, and then will be translated by her wonderful friend that's here, and going to be making sure that we can all understand each other, because as we all know, sometimes language can be a barrier, and we can't let that allow us to stop from being in spaces with each other. So please, let's welcome Kandara.
Hernando Querer, Miriaua Takunan, é um prazer estar aqui nessa roda de conversa com vozes tão potentes, com líderes tão influentes.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with a lot of leaders, interesting people, and you guys.
Sou liderança indígena do meu povo, Brasil, do estado da Bahia, município de Porto Seguro, filha de 2 grandes caciques do meu povo, Yamani Pataxó e Crispim Pataxó.
I'm a leader from Pataxó's community from this Bahia state. I am daughter of. Can you repeat? Pode repetir o nome dele? Crispim
Pataxó.
Pataxó.
Yamani Pataxó.
Yamani Pataxó. Her parents.
Pela primeira vez estando aqui no país de vocês, aqui quero deixar um abraço muito especial para minha irmã Simone, que eu acredito que do conhecimento de vocês foi quem nos apresentou para que eu pudesse estar aqui. A minha irmã que esteve no nosso território, que trocamos muitas experiências.
A huge thanks for Simone, who is doing this bridge to bring her here.
E aí quero compartilhar um pouquinho com vocês. Eu sou um pouco, assim, aparentemente tranquila, mas aquela liderança elétrica, não sou muito de ficar quietinha.
She's saying she's calm, but she's energetic.
Eu quero compartilhar com vocês, eu sou uma liderança indígena, meu ativismo, minha mãe cacica com muita sabedoria, que eu comecei meu ativismo desde muito cedo.
She's talking, she began her activism since she was really child.
Muito cedo. Peço desculpa por não poder falar a língua de vocês. Eu só falo o meu português e o meu idioma, que é a língua do meu povo, que é Pachorrã. Mas a gente vai se comunicando do jeito que os encantados nossos ancestrais assim permitir.
I'm sorry for not speaking your language. We are trying our best and to translate, and everyone can understand each other.
Meu ativismo é pela garantia dos direitos das mulheres indígenas que vem sendo ao longo de toda a história, tendo nossos direitos violados, sendo silenciadas, ou pelo feminicídio, ou porque quando você defende uma bandeira, defende o meio ambiente, defende seu território. Sou uma liderança que sou constantemente ameaçada dentro do meu território. Infelizmente, as pessoas tentam nos calar quando você defende o meio ambiente, defende a mãe natureza, defende os direitos, a garantia daqueles que são mais necessitados. E nós, povos indígenas, agora eu falo aqui diante de tantos irmãos e irmãs, de tantos líderes, pode estar em países diferentes, realidades diferentes, mas a nossa luta é uma só. Podemos falar línguas diferentes, mas a nossa luta é uma só. Na defesa do nosso território, na defesa do nosso meio ambiente, mas em defesa à vida. Porque nós, lideranças, chega um dia que nós vamos morar com o Pai Eterno. Precisamos plantar semente para que outras pessoas possam dar continuidade a essa luta. A gente vê tantos sistemas falando que defende os povos indígenas, mas são sistemas que só querem mídia para falar que defende os povos indígenas, onde na prática faz um genocídio em curso, nos matam, nos calam, nos impedem de participar de grandes assembleias como está acontecendo agora. Somos impedidos de falar, porque a voz da realidade é a voz da verdade. Defendemos nosso território e por isso, por defender, pagamos um preço muito alto.
Okay, let's go. A lot of things. First of all, her activism is against female violence. So we have all these equity, gender causes as well. First, then because in their territory a lot of women are dying, they are silenced. So every time they want to protect the forest and everything, and people kill them more and more. So that's the point. Every time they speak, people want to make them die and everything. So that's the main idea.
Quero poder plantar aqui, hoje vindo do Brasil, um país com tanta diversidade, com uma cultura, somos hoje 305 povos indígenas, etnias diferentes, 274 línguas faladas, somos um pouquinho...
This is important because it's data. So in Brazil today we have 305 people, different people in Brazil, and 264 languages alive today.
Somos um pouquinho a mais de 1 milhão hoje no território brasileiro dos povos originários. Criaram agora, historicamente, os primeiro Ministério dos Povos Indígenas, onde a minha irmã Sônia Guajajara é a ministra.
So nowadays we are kind of 1 million people, indigenous people in Brazil nowadays. And for the first time, we have now an indigenous minister. And Sônia Guajajara, her friend, is the minister.
Esperamos nós assim como eu falei para a nossa ministra, assim como para o presidente Lula, que hoje nós temos como um órgão oficial dos povos originários a FUNAI, que é a Joênia Alpichana, falamos para ele que não seja só mais um ministério, um elefante branco, que se faça valer de fato aquele espaço, aplicando políticas públicas e demarcando o nosso território indígena. Porque espaço por espaço, vazio, sem importância, para nós não interessa como os povos indígenas.
So now that we have this minister, we need to do actions, because only the whole thing with no action doesn't matter. We need to do things, demarcate the territory, and do politics to support this. Not only we have the territory and that's it, you go. No, we need to organize things.
Queremos espaços em instituições, em espaço de governo, seja o espaço quanto sociedade, que agora, caminhando para a minha finalidade da minha primeiro momento aqui, dizer o seguinte: instituições têm suas responsabilidades, o poder público tem suas responsabilidades, mas nós, enquanto sociedade civil, temos a maior responsabilidade de defender os povos originários, os povos indígenas, o meio ambiente, e dizer, não esperamos nós que a revolução, que alguém de lá de cima vai entrar para baixo para melhorar nossas vidas, porque não vai. Movimentamos nós temos um poder incrível, que é o poder da militância, o poder do ativismo. Nós temos a obrigação, sim, de defender os povos originários, a obrigação de defender a mãe natureza. Então, eu deixo aqui este recado, planto essa semente como uma jovem liderança indígena, consequentemente cacica do meu povo, que é eu que vou dar continuidade ao trabalho da minha mãe. Flore o ativismo dentro de vocês, defenda os povos originários e, acima de tudo, defenda as lideranças indígenas, caciques e lideranças de vocês, e não é uma ONU, não é qualquer outra instituição que vai nos calar. Sejamos nós as vozes daquele que não conseguiram ter o espaço de voz.
So first, we want our spaces in the publics and every place. We need to have our space as well. And the second thing, the most important thing from today is that every person who is here, listen, trying to understand, to listen, to see, to spread the word as well, to be activist, to talk to this and to leave this message for all people, because we need, as a citizen, we need to defend our originary people.
Deixo aqui uma bênção do meu povo para vocês, para todos os irmãos e irmãs, que não se intimidem com um olhar feio, com um não, né? Que os encantados nos abençoem, nos fortaleça a continuar ainda mais lutando pelos nossos territórios, né? Pela nossa mãe natureza. A floresta, ela tem que ficar de pé. A floresta é vida. Então, que cada nossos ancestrais esteja em cada lugar aqui, nos abençoe, nos fortaleça. E vou finalizar dizendo que os povos indígenas, independente de país, independente de continente, nós somos um único só povo, somos povos indígenas, independente de língua, independente de cultura, independente de ritual. Somos povos originários, guardiões deste mundo, deste planeta. Unitiaweri para vocês, na minha língua quer dizer muito obrigado.
So the point is, everything that exists in the forest is life. So we need to protect every kind of life. Nichiaweri means thank you very much.
hello. Make sure it's turned off. Yeah. Give it up again for Kandara, everybody, for coming and being here with us today. From very far. Yes, take a bow. So at this point, we have a little something for you all. Our climate movements are a lot stronger through our relationships with each other. We build strong relationships, and we do that through making space to listen to each other, share stories with each other. So we're going to invite all of you to share in this practice with us in something called a pair exchange, where we will invite you to take turns listening and sharing to each other here in the audience. Pick the person next to you. Pick somebody you know, or maybe somebody you don't know. You don't have to get too crazy. You don't have to go from here to the back, but pick somebody next to you. We're going to take 2-minute turns. You'll turn to each other and you will share and you will listen. We'll let you know when the 2 minutes has started and when it has ended. So after 2 minutes, we're going to ask you to switch the person so that the other person has a chance to share. We're going to put it up here on the screen. There it is. Woohoo! All right, so during your share, consider sharing what did you hear from the first 3 speakers? What connections might you have to their story? What opportunities might be possible to move, adjust, transition forward? Okay? Somebody let me know. The 2 minutes has now begun. Let's find that out right now. And then for sure, we're going to do 2 of each, right? We're going to do the people one and then we'll do it again. Yeah. Okay. So we can start with yeah, because we're going to bring them back. Yeah, okay. Okay, 2 minutes is up. Make sure you give your partner a chance to answer the same questions. Switch to the other person and allow them to speak.
Okay, no, he's here. Okay. And then I don't see. Yeah. Okay, so. Okay. I don't know how to change it. Maybe I'll. It'll be on the slide.
All right.
All right, all right, all right. It's time. It's time. Ready? People gonna rise like the water. We're gonna face this crisis now. I hear the voice of my great granddaughter. She said, keep it in the ground. Sing with us. The people gonna flow like the water. We're gonna shut this system down. I hear the voice of my great ancestors. They said, keep it in the ground. Sing with us. The people gonna rise like the water. We're gonna face this crisis now. I hear the voice of my great granddaughter. She said, keep it in the ground. The people gonna flow like the water. We're gonna shut this system down. I hear the voice of my great ancestors. They said, keep it in the ground. Woo!
All right. Thank you all so much. Okay, so there's one announcement I want to make, which is that not everyone got white cards when they came in. So there is someone in the audience, that's Adrian standing over here, who has white cards, and also Randy in the yellow t-shirt over here. So if you have a question that you want to pose to one of these panelists, please raise your hand and they'll bring over a white card to you. I'm seeing a couple of hands, one in the center here, one in the back over there. So keep your hands up and they'll come by. So for the next speaker, I wanted to introduce a dear comrade who's not actually in the room, but who prepared a video for us all to watch, and that is Kali Akuno. So can we have a cheer for Kali Akuno? Kali is the founder and director of Cooperation Jackson and has been fighting for economic justice, climate justice, and racial justice in the South for a very long time. He also was a part of special projects for Mayor Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi, and has been working in sort of international climate fights for decades. And just this past week, many of our friends and comrades were down in Jackson, Mississippi, learning a lot about the work that they're doing down there. So as well as like building comradeship. So with that, I'm going to pull up Kali's video to then share with you all. And so is someone else doing that? Oh, great. Just that. All right, I think I might have it up.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Kali Akuno. I'm with Cooperation Jackson. So sorry I couldn't be in person for this event. Fortunately, the struggle requires me to be home in Jackson to take care of some urgent business, but did want to share with you a few thoughts about where we are at. Know now that this was the hottest summer in so-called recorded history. This is probably going to be the coldest summer of the rest of our lives. And we need to sit with that and really reflect on, do we want to allow this calamity to just continue to escalate? Or are we determined to really do something about it? Now, I believe for the most part, all of you who are there, I'm speaking to the choir. But I want to challenge us and push us to think about what more we now need to do to deal with the crisis at hand. Obviously, we have to reach more people and we have to bring them to the fold of struggle. There's no question about that. But I think we need to really interrogate at this point in time many of our approaches. I think we have to go deeper in terms of dealing with direct action. We know we're going to continue to need lobbying and advocacy and education initiatives, but at some point, we're going to actually have to just stop the polluters and the extractors from extracting and polluting. And I think that time is now, because we're on a runaway cycle at this particular point in time. And if we want to ensure that our children and grandchildren and their children and beyond have a planet that is inhabitable, it is up to us now to put some brakes on this in real time. And so we need to repivot. And I think thinking our strategy very critically, comrades. I'm just going to put that out there. We have witnessed over the past decade some tremendous struggle. We need to reflect on those struggles, even where they did not necessarily look to be as effective as we wanted them to be in terms of stopping, let's say, some of the pipelines. I think they pointed a direction forward. And I think the critical piece is, how do we, deepen our resolve, meet the challenge that we know, where the governments, either in a liberal disguise or the more right-wing disguise, are doing everything they can to criminalize our resistance. We have to be prepared, as Malcolm X says, we have to really be prepared to be convicted of our convictions and to be able to stand upon that, because that is what the situation really requires. We have to build alternatives, utilizing our own means, utilizing the knowledge, that comes from our ancestors, that comes deep from the rich community practices of knowledge that has been born on, to build the real concrete alternatives that are going to transition us into the society that we want and need. And the solutions are out there. Don't let anybody tell you that there are no solutions out there, or that we have to continue along the path of burning fossil fuels, or we have to revert to utilizing nuclear energy. Humanity has a rich history, long history, of in certain societies doing very well without having to resort either to extractive or exploitative practices or hierarchical practices, but also living well within the natural means provided by Mother Earth. And this is a critical piece that we're going to have to relearn and build the capacity and the practices to get us there. I want to encourage everyone to check out the Just Transition Primer that myself and many comrades in the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, Transnational Institute, worked on to really try to just kind of outline both what time it is, what we need to be prepared to confront, naming the system, confronting the system on an international level, and the backdrop of that around, really trying to reclaim certain aspects of this framework of a just transition, in particular to keep corporations from stealing it and appropriating as they try to do so much else within our framework, is to really grounded in a solid anti-capitalist analysis and historical development to really situate it and how this all came to be, and how we need to act in solidarity on an international level to deconstruct it and build a world where many alternatives are possible, many worlds are possible. I hope we all work together in the precious little time that we have, to strengthen our bonds, which are going to be needed in the struggles going forward, and really sit down and examine what course of actions we need to take going forward to deal with the crisis, and to be very clear about where our enemies and opponents are. We should take firm stock, in particular, of where the United States government is at, for instance, and not ignore what John Kerry basically told us this summer around how the United States government is going to deal with this international question, when he said unequivocally that the United States is not going to pay or make any fundamental contribution towards a loss and damage fund, for instance, or make any effort to do any form of historic reparations for the world, for the U.S.'s emissions and its role in creating this extractive system. We need to take them seriously. We need to get prepared to start thinking about what it is that we have to do, because they are not going to come to any sensible conclusion on meeting the world and where it needs. So it's in our hands now. Let's make the time and let's build the movement that we need to create the future that we need. This is Kali signing off.
All right. Great. Can we have another round of applause for Kali? All right. Yeah, he really brought a lot of the fire. And yeah, just to give a second shout out to the Just Transition Primer, it's really incredible. And I know many of us have probably started to hear the corporate capture of the idea of just transition. Who knows, it might be on like bumper stickers and on like your weird Dasani water bottles next. And that primer is really intended to say, no, this is what we mean when we say it from the front lines. The idea that just transition is about systems change and not just individually switching out technologies. And so on this same thread of strong Black leadership in the climate movement, I wanted to introduce Raya Salter. Yeah, so can you give a round of applause? So Raya is one, representing the Black Hive here, which is dope. And then two is the founder and executive director of the Energy, Justice, Law, and Policy Center, and a member of the New York State Climate Action Council. She is an adjunct professor at Cardozo Law School and is widely published on matters of energy regulation and is the author of Energy Justice. And the final thing I wanted to note, just having read your bio, is that she testified in front of Congress twice and went viral for one of those times for standing up to the GOP during during a hearing on big oil. So with that fire and energy, I want to introduce Raya and bring you up here.
Hey, Auntie. That's right. All right. Thank you so much. I am honored and proud to be here with everyone on the stage, proud to be here to represent the Black Hive, and just glad to be here. And I really want to spend some time to dig in a bit to where we are with false solutions in the context of the Inflation Reduction Act. We're in a tough space with false solutions right now, and I'm going to give some context of what's been happening in New York State. And is coming, if not already, in a jurisdiction very near you. So yes, I'm the founder and executive director of the Energy, Justice, Law, and Policy Center. We are a public interest law firm and think tank. We're focused on community-based advocacy and energy policy. We also convene the Energy Justice Alliance, which is a grassroots Black-led BIPOC and allies movement uniting our communities for a just transition. Took that picture yesterday. We were so cute. Hey to everybody who is out here to end fossil fuels. Last thing I'll say, I am also your climate auntie. I'm climate auntie on Instagram. Consider me your climate auntie. We are climate family. We got climate aunties, grandmas, grandpas, everybody here with us today. All right, so this is going to be really quick, and I'm going to stay in time, and I'm going to dig in a bit. And I want to give some context because really we're looking at a fossil fuel industry that is emboldened and is making more money than it has ever made before. And as the Oversight Committee put out a compelling report last year, really about the long-running misinformation campaign that the fossil fuel industry uses to fight climate action on every single level. Again, at that hearing, and we know the highest profits than they've ever made. And as was mentioned, I had my own little incident when I went to testify before that hearing. A gentleman here was right there too as well. And I just mention it because, you know, I ended up having my own Tucker Carlson takedown segment, which is an honor in a way. But we need to come together and protect each other because it's becoming more dangerous in the United States and throughout the world to speak up against the fossil fuel industry. So, you know, if you speak out against them, they will come for you. And speaking of all that money, all that lobbying resulted in the Inflation Reduction Act, which, yes, is the largest investment that the United States has ever made in climate, but it is also billions and billions of dollars in subsidies for false solutions. This is the government actively supporting and paying for carbon capture and storage, so-called clean hydrogen, advanced nuclears, and so-called zero emissions. It's really distressing, and it's opening the door to this idea. And this color wheel is nothing but the fossil fuel industry marketing. So you hear me saying so-called, and we need to remember that. We're talking about pink hydrogen, which is so-called clean hydrogen made from nuclear, and extension of the biodiesel and alternative fuels credits. And I want to just show, and this is, mind you, this is from Rhodium and MIT, a sources funded by the fossil fuel industry we can't necessarily trust. But there's been announced $257 billion in projects. Now, a lot of that is PV, storage, renewables, the things we want to see. 75% increase over the past 2 years. So the IRA is having a massive impact. But take a look at these. You see these blue and then these dark gray circles? Take a look at those. Those are the carbon management in the hydrogen. Look at where those big circles are, right? We talk about the expansion of sacrifice zones. Please remember that the United States is the world's top oil and gas producer. Please remember that. So we're talking about major false solutions happening as we speak. One prominent example I've been talking about is Exxon just a few months ago, powered by IRA dollars, entered into an almost $5 billion deal for the biggest carbon capture pipeline that we will have seen in the United States down in Texas. So, boo, right? This is our government at work. One other piece of, I want folks to understand that they're paying for it, they're subsidizing it, and they're building legal and regulatory pathways to grease the wheels for these false solutions. Now, we've seen this in many levels, NEPA adjustments, and also just this summer, the EPA power plant rules. Now, I'm not going to dig into this a lot. It's a lot of policy. But essentially, the EPA is looking to create a carbon capture standard, requiring certain power plants to actually use this technology that we know creates sacrifice zones and won't work. This is raw politics and money, and it's supported by a lot of the large green NGOs under this theory that because CCS is so expensive and won't work, that a lot of the older plants will actually retire rather than be able to adopt this technology. This is the logic that I take question with, but this is the logic, and this is happening as we speak. So what is this doing to us here in New York? We have a little law here called the CLCPA that we got for it in 2019. I suspect there's some people out here who know about it. Woo woo! And we're proud of it, right? We're proud of it. We've got big renewables goals, and we're the home to this Justice 40 idea that we have 40% of benefits going to frontline communities or disadvantaged communities. But we have been, ever since we got that law in place, we've been fighting every day, tooth and nail, against the industry and their false solutions who are trying to stop us. So one of the processes the law created was a Climate Action Council to create the state's climate plan. Again, me and others, folks in this room and outside, every day for darn near 4 years, fighting the fossil fuel industry and their desire to put false solutions into our climate plan. They did make some headway, but we pushed back, we put guardrails and did our darndest to stop it. But what happened when the IRA was passed is it put false solutions on steroids, and the momentum that we have felt coming to New York State with the promise of all this money has really been devastating. So just in December, we finalized our climate plan. What happens when the industry doesn't get what they want? They come and try and change your law. Change your law. In December, we passed the plan. They convinced our governor that they needed to start rolling back our climate law. Just months after, the entire network of New York activists jumped up and pushed back against it, but we know it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. And so now we face another false solution, this idea of cap and trade, fully in New York State. We have the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, but we're talking about cap and trade more broadly in New York State in this environment of emboldened fossil fuel interests and false solutions. And that's happening here in New York State every single day. And this is how it's going to be coming to a jurisdiction near you. And here's what you need to look out for. Bottom line, be it at COP, be it in your hometown, anything short of a managed just transition that results in actually shutting down power plants and dismantling fossil fuel infrastructure and ending extraction is a distraction and an industry tactic, period. Period. And that's all I gotta say. Hit your Climate Auntie up on Instagram.
Sorry, we're back.
They're trying to put my face on there, I think.
Some of you may know that this is not Crystal. And Crystal Tubos could not be here today. So just take a moment to say our prayers. She did have 2 deaths in her family prior to this week and had to stay home and be with her family and take care of them. So just a quick prayers up for Crystal, who could not be with us today. But we do have a brilliant expert in the room here when we talk about these false solutions. And one of those things is called geoengineering. We have with us today Maganga, who, man, I got to meet. She does work with the Indigenous Environmental Network. I did get to meet her as a result of that. But more importantly, sometimes when you meet a person, you get a feeling. When I first met Maganga, I got a feeling of power, of love, of respect, of just basic humanity, caring about her people, caring about all people. Coming to us today all the way from Alaska, where there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of problems around what people believe. And so to continue and round out our panel, last but certainly not least, please welcome me. Welcome, come help me welcome her to the stage, Maganga.
I need a stepping stool. I'm just kidding. Can you see me? Yeah. Wanga atka bangangang nang naka bangawi, wanga ataka akan natrama naka Kirsten Nugak Pas, wanga kiwagami. So I come from St. Lawrence Island. It's an island that's between Alaska and Russia. And some of us can actually see Russia from our houses. And we've been through several waves of colonization. The European whalers came in the 1800s and they decimated our whale population. Whales have sustained us for thousands of years, as have the walrus and many other sea mammals. And this, coupled with the eruption of Krakatoa, which caused 2 straight years of winter in Alaska, caused a famine that wiped out 99% of our population on the island. And so we repopulated our island by inviting people who are of the same culture and language from Indian Point over in Siberia. And so we have very close ties and relationships to people who are in Siberia today. And as you can imagine, those relationships have been strained over time as our oppressive governments have been in conflict. We also have experienced a lot of pollution. The Bering Strait, where the island sits, is one of 2 thoroughways to the Arctic. And if you don't know this, all pollutants travel to the north. And so they travel through those 2 thoroughways. We're some of the most polluted people in the world. And this is also because they built a military base on our island during the Cold War. We're a Superfund site. This base was large enough to sustain 200 troops for 2 years. They had a bowling alley, they had a movie theater, and when it was time for them to leave, they were instructed to take a backpack, cut the lines, and leave. So they cut the fuel lines and they spilt heavy metal solvents and all sorts of pollutants onto our land, which seeped into a lagoon. And today, those who are there at Northeast Cape, it's not a question of if you're going to get cancer, it's when. And so we live in a cancer cluster. So what I take from that is global history has shown that our bodies are used as sacrifice zones to ensure things are safe for white bodies and white communities in the name of colonialism and capitalism. I come from a land with a history of peoples who have always had things done to us, on us, and for us without our permissions. Experimentation and poisoning by the military and government, we live in a cancer cluster and are considered some of the most polluted people in the world. And now climate mitigation like geoengineering testing is being attempted by the academic institutions driven and backed by billionaires and fossil fuel interests. I am always reminded of the words of my colleague Aklasia Kamasuk. Climate change solutions are not those preventing sea ice loss, mitigating sea level rise, or refracting sun rays back into the atmosphere. What Western science is focusing on are the effects of climate change, running to the next emergency, attempting mitigation, not meeting the threshold, and starting the cycle all over again. Anyone who is in good relationship will tell you that solutions must be local and community-led. They do not lie halfway across the globe, but in your relationship with your neighbor, local organizations, and most importantly, the indigenous peoples on whose land you reside. Climate change, mass die-off of biodiversity is not possible without designating certain lands and peoples as sacrifice zones. The ability for us to over-emit so grossly is due to the treatment of BIPOC communities as less than human. This is also true with geoengineering. Already geoengineering tests have been conducted or attempted on our lands, waters, skies, soils, and forests without free, prior, and informed consent. When Western experts talk about geoengineering, they generally have 2 categories: carbon removal and solar radiation management or solar radiation mitigation. Under these umbrellas, there are many forms of technology, but I only have time to share about a few specifics. Carbon dioxide removal includes carbon capture and storage, direct air capture, bioenergy carbon capture and storage, and ocean fertilization. Carbon capture and storage supposedly sucks carbon at source, condenses it into a liquid form, and transfers it to a site for sequestration. Carbon is extremely corrosive. It only takes a little bit of moisture to help it eat away at the container it's quote-unquote sequestered in, and when it comes out, it expands into a gas. One such occurrence happened in Sarcosia, Mississippi in August 2021. People in the area continue to experience health impacts from this to this day. Carbon sequestration is ineffective and a health hazard. The infrastructure needed for this techno-fix is not possible economically or physically. And no CCS project has ever met its targets. Yet our governments and fossil fuel companies continue to invest in this technology because of carbon credits and net zero. 93% of the carbon captured in the United States alone is used for enhanced oil recovery, where they flush out nearly depleted oil wells with carbon to get more oil faster. Russ George, who has run many failed businesses and schemes in ocean fertilization, spoke to the Alaska Senate about dumping millions of tons of iron ore into the ocean off of the coast of Kodiak. The last time his experiment happened, the number of toxic algal blooms increased, causing shellfish poisonings in Alaska. Solar radiation management or mitigation includes stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening, microbubbles, painting white surfaces white, and many other things. The theory is that you can reflect sunlight back into space because the sun, of course, the source of all life, is the problem, not extractive industry. So one of these projects used to be called ICE 9/11. It's now called Arctic Ice Project. They deployed football fields worth of synthetic silica hollow glass microspheres to attempt to thicken the ice in the Arctic without the free, prior, and informed consent of the tribal governments and community members in Utqiagvik. This project was founded by Leslie Field, who had spent decades before this contracting with Chevron and working for HP. ScopeX of Harvard University attempted to deploy weather balloon testing over Sami territory without free, prior, and informed consent of the indigenous peoples. The project is funded by Bill Gates and would support research for a technology meaning to spray millions of tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. Their own computer simulations show that doing this would disrupt monsoon cycles, cause drought in the Amazon rainforest, and would disrupt crops. For instance, the US wouldn't be able to grow corn, Japan wouldn't be able to grow rice. The Sami have stood up to say no to this project, and now scholars such as David Keith, John Moore, and Matthias Rees of the Carr Center for Human Rights claim that this is unethical for the Sami to do so. The Arctic is supposedly the most strategic location for this testing. They perceive that the benefit of the Western world once again supersedes the rights of indigenous peoples and ways of being. The privately funded tech bro horror, known as Make Sunsets, funds their technology by selling quote-unquote cooling credits, which uses home-brewed sulfur dioxide and releases it in weather balloons. When they did this test in Mexico, their government banned outdoor solar geoengineering testing. So now they're doing it here in the US, where they're not protecting us, out of hotel rooms and public parks. They know the sound arguments against the release of the poison, and yet their arrogance allows them to continue. The existence of racism means that Western-trained scientists and Western institutions, who often have the power to develop climate policy, believe that indigenous peoples are simple-minded and don't understand science. It means they also have an unconscious bias toward Western values and Western priorities. Their internalized supremacy-rooted beliefs lead them to argue that indigenous peoples don't have the right to say no to geoengineering testing, even if it's done on our own lands, waters, bodies, and air. Their internalized superiority leads them to sincerely believe that their interests are global interests and should therefore supersede the rights of indigenous communities to sovereignty and free, prior, and informed consent. We are here to tell you that as indigenous peoples, we have an inherent understanding that the commodification of life has failed us, including that which is permitted through carbon offsets, biodiversity offsets, and market-based mechanism schemes used to prolong the fossil fuel era. We have had an inherent understanding that testing single-dimensional research areas like feasibility and short-term ingestion toxicity in laboratories is simplistic. You cannot predict how large-scale deployment of carbon reduction and solar radiation management will impact complex interdependent ecosystems. Not involving those who are among these ecosystems is not only disrespectful and racist, it is foolish and dangerous. Testing whether a material will thicken the ice does not consider how spreading materials over 100,000 square kilometers will impact the life system within that ice, which depends on sunlight and the delicate freeze-melt cycle of the Arctic. Indigenous peoples are not permitted to give adequate intervention on the subject within the framework of our own belief systems. We wade through scores of academics, institutions, and policymakers who try to suck us into irrelevant debates, such as the pros and cons of geoengineering. We are not here to debate this. We are here to assert the relevance of our own cosmovision, our own science, and our own tribal sovereignty and rights. These policymakers and academics have no understanding of their own histories and patterns of violating land rights, tribal sovereignty, and our right to true consent. We have protected 80% of Earth's biodiversity with our blood. Geoengineering is a sign of industrial desperation. It's the swan song of an extraction-based economy, which has always been doomed to fail. Geoengineering testing is a form of unjust deployment and experimentation on Indigenous peoples without their free, prior, and informed consent. The deployment of such technologies at scale could only ever be a form of testing, and the impacts would be cataclysmic. The only true answer is to heal our relationship with each other and the sacredness of Mother Earth, end capitalism, colonialism, which are based in the commodification of life.
Thank you so much, Pananga. A second round of applause for Pananga. Thank you for so beautifully speaking about the dangers of geoengineering and the stakes that we are really up against and what we're fighting for. Pananga and I met each other at COP26 in Scotland. Was that 27? 26. And we were bunkmates. So I've gotten to the pleasure of getting to know Pananga over the years and also know how incredible her work has been on this issue in particular around geoengineering. It's incredible. So thank you. So this would not be an ITR event without another pair share. So we're going to, again, ask you all to turn to your neighbors, having taken in so much of this content and wisdom of our panelists up here. And we're going to have, again, 2-minute turns where we will ask the first person to listen, to hear, like, what are the themes that you're hearing from your partner? And the 3 questions are, what did you hear from the speakers? What connections might you have to their stories? And what opportunities might be possible to move a just transition forward? So I'm going to have our comrade Al start the timer, and please feel free to choose another partner or stay with the same. You'll have 2 minutes and then we'll tell you to switch. Okay, quick announcement. If you filled out your cards and you have a question, this is the time when Randy and Adrian will be coming around to collect them, because the next section is Q&A. So if you have one, feel free to raise your hand and hand it off to them. All right, this is your invitation to switch who is speaking, if you haven't done so already.
Okay, find it so we can.
Tired?
Should we say to Okay. This is
Okay, everybody. We're gonna beat back corporate greed. We're gonna beat back corporate greed. We're gonna end fossil fuels. We're gonna end fossil fuels. We're gonna keep it in the ground. We're gonna keep it in the ground. We're gonna win back our land and life. We're gonna win back our land and life. Sing with us. We're gonna beat back corporate greed. We're gonna beat back corporate greed. We're gonna end fossil fuels. We're gonna end fossil fuels. We're gonna keep it in the ground. We're gonna keep it in the ground. We're gonna win back our land and life. We're gonna win back our land and life. Woo!
Shout out to Drum for offering that chant to us earlier, and shout out to Tom for his beat making on the mic just now. All right, so now is the time for questions and answers. And we know that there's been a few that have come up, as well as folks who may still have them. I see someone with theirs raised. So if you have additional questions, please put the card up and someone will come and collect it.
All right, so as we get the questions up here, just again, a reminder that we are having a social this evening out in the cafeteria courtyard area. You are all invited to join us. We will have some refreshments and we'll have some food. We'll gather and we'll continue these conversations to talk to each other in a less structured way. And talking about leading on into tomorrow, where we're going to be doing a continuation of this, but teach-in style, with some frontline community speakers who you're going to hear from tomorrow that will then go into deeper conversations about all these things and unpacking these things that are sometimes heavy that we're hearing about. And so you're all welcome to continue to stay this evening, to, if you have to leave in return, for our social, which will be until 9 p.m. here at the new school. We have food, basically, so stay. All right, so Margaret here is bringing up some of our first questions, and oh yes, and I regret to inform you that our sister from Brazil has had to leave at this moment, but has left me with her Instagram information. This is the best way to reach her. So any questions that we have for her, we will make sure she gets, and she will reach out and continue to help answer those questions and continue to help make sure that if you want to make that connection, it's there. Okay.
All right, so our first question is, do you think there should be an alternative space to COP and any UN-sponsored event for frontline Indigenous groups to organize for climate justice? And the addition is current protocols leave our voices out, and only state actors, which are heavily funded and infiltrated by the industry, and those folks have decision-making power. Who would like to take this question?
Yes, we need to, when I made the remarks earlier, we need to create our own space as people of the land, people throughout the world, especially the Global South. The Global South does not have resources. And so those of us that live in the North have access to foundations or to donors, can raise the necessary funding in order to bring people together. There is an alternative gathering during the second week, I believe, of the UN Conference of the Parties. That's going to be in Pakistan. And, we have reached out as our network to see how can we help support that. So we need our own space. We need to develop our strategy, as I said earlier at the beginning. There's a lot of false data out there, a lot of lies and scams. When we left, for an example, the Conference of the Parties, I forgot what number it was, in Paris, the Paris Agreement, the Paris Accord in 2015. It was nothing about it was all about false solution. No legally binding agreement, treaty of governments of the world, especially northern industrialized countries, to reduce their emissions. Legally binding, no. Okay? But it was full of false solutions, especially REDD, reducing emissions from forest degradation and destruction, REDD. So I remember we left there as IEN, and our statement coming out of Paris was that Paris Agreement was nothing but an agreement against the destruction of Mother Earth and our people. That's what it was about. And right now we're continuing to see militarization and that concept. Why is the corporations and privatization, government and investment acting like it's a war against Mother Earth, the sacredness of Mother Earth? That's what it's all about. Violence against Mother Earth. The objectification of Mother Earth, the same way that leadership throughout the world objectify our women. It's no different. Murdered, missing Indigenous women, murdered and missing biodiversity and species. It's all about the same thing. We got to change that. We got to go to the streets, like my brother said. That's a tactic. We got to organize. But also for us, in consultation with some of the elders, we got to stay involved in that BS that goes on in the UN meetings. They will bring their own Indigenous peoples. They will bring their own Black folks. They will bring their own people of color and from the global south. They will co-op our folks. We know that, so we got to be there. Be at the table. If we're not at the table, we're the menu. That's what Oren Lyons told me. So that's something, a factor. We put some people in there, continue to have knowledge, strategy, but we also take part in this alternative. We got to build that people's movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Are there others who want to announce and address the question? Nemo.
Yeah, just to thank you, Tom. I fully endorse what you said. Just also to add that the alternative space is very much needed. And we saw one on the failure of Copenhagen, which was the meeting in Cochabamba, Bolivia, in 2010, the People's Summit on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth. That conference really showed that there should be an alternative. But unfortunately, I think geopolitics and other considerations have not allowed it to happen again. But we really need something at that scope because the COP is so badly broken, and we need to have the very strong alternative spaces where decisions are made. Today and for the next 2 weeks, we're having African People's Counter COP. It started early this morning. Early this morning, New York time. not early the morning in Africa. But, and that is a space for organization, for planning, for strategizing, and for getting the right demands. And of course, putting pressure on our own governments, because when they get to the multilateral space, they just kind of disappear into these spaces, and then the corporations reign all over the place. So yes, we need the alternative space, but the COP space is also a space that needs to be contested. Unfortunately, that's the reality today.
It's okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next question. Thank you, Nima. This one here, regarding a just transition. How do we organize in our communities? And go. And maybe we can add.
Yeah, maybe these two are sort of connected because they have to do with this idea of what it might take to organize for a just transition. So one says, how on a global level do we proceed with the cessation of all mining? And the other, how do we get the tribal leadership to get on board with a just transition when the oil companies are paying them off?
The add-ons just made it like a broader, more complicated question.
Answer all of the add-ons.
I don't pretend to have the answers to all of them, but at the end of the day, it's how do we organize our communities? It's person by person, it's organization by organization. I think I know something I'm committed to, and many in the Hive and on the stage too, probably, really leveraging the power of storytelling, of culture, utilizing, maybe some of the technology in a good way, in that how can we get this message out, organize our folks, educate our folks, entertain our folks, and bring forward those new leaders.
I agree, yeah. But just like relationships, to keep it simple, having good relationship with one another.
Right. So much of the solutions on the table are based on weaponized science. In an era of growing anti-science, how do we navigate this contradiction?
I'll jump in 1 second, because one of the issues that's really important is the fossil fuel industry, infiltration and co-option of academia. This has been happening on a big scale to billions of dollars, MIT, Stanford, and I say this now because I went to, somebody had a thing? Columbia. Now, I went to Wesleyan University for undergrad and was blown away to discover that the chair of the board of trustees at Wesleyan is a whole entire Chevron director. Boo, right? So now, on top of all the other things we do, we got to have a side campaign and ride at dawn because there's nothing cute about that. So just that the weaponized science, they are buying and paying for these studies. The whole gas as a bridge fuel was manufactured by MIT and Ernie Moniz, paid for by the fossil fuel industry and inserted into the Obama administration's agenda. And we are still suffering from that today. So just, speaking to students, we have to keep our eye on the ball for that.
Thank you so much, Raya. Would anyone else like to answer any of those 3 questions?
When we were doing some organizing in our community in Alaska, we had some Maori brothers and sisters come up, and Bentham Ohai was one of them. And one of the things he talked about was what counts as knowledge, what knowledge counts, and who decides, right? So whose science are we really talking about? And who's deciding, who has the power to decide which science counts and which science we're building policy around? And just think about that.
All right. Our next question is, please make the connection between how walking the UAW picket line as an ally can push for labor and climate justice wins. It's hot labor now for a just transition. I should have made sure I could read the handwriting before I asked the full question. But I'm going to say that the gist of the question is how, in this moment, when there are workers out on the picket lines who are trying to put forward sort of climate related demands, what does that mean for the relationship between the climate justice movement and labor in this long-term fight for climate?
Well, a quick answer before you give the context. In the United States, labor is part of ought to be part of climate justice movement. And so we actually need to find ways to work with them. They started just transition concept, started with labor. And, most workers are scared of losing their jobs. But let me just share a joke. You hear a lot about green jobs. If you go to many of our indigenous communities, everybody's doing green jobs. Am I right? Farming, fishing, do all those things are green jobs. So what green jobs are they talking about? But anyway, I know they're talking about the technical aspect, but even that can create more jobs. And one thing for me, now not forgetting my background, my communities that are heavily polluted, if we manage to have the political space to commence a cleanup of the pollution, that will create far more jobs than the drilling for oil and for gas. So let's begin a national cleanup, and everybody will be employed.
Okay. This is for Tom. How do you envision your community accessing clean energy in the near future?
Oh, right on. Again, 2 communities. I think the biggest challenge, whether it's the Dene people, Navajo. How many Navajos in here? Stand up and yell like a real Navajo. Yeah, Dene. Okay, or whether it's Dakota. I'm looking at our vast Navajo nation. It is a nation that encompasses the 4 corners of 4 states. And there's a lot of Bureau of Indian Affairs, U.S. government imposing its priorities on Navajo Nation years ago, brokering extraction contract deals for coal, for oil, for gas, mining, the whole big mountain where a lot of our traditional families reside. So there's decades of colonization, what we're talking about, exploitation, imposition of economic systems that don't work. And that little carrot dangling, your people are poor and we got the solution. The question is, how do we make a transition away from a fossil fuel economy that has been developed by the colonial government of the United States to a living economy that does embrace the Diné philosophy? Even some of our brothers and sisters that developed the fundamental laws of the Diné people years ago, that was based upon what we talk about traditions and value system, was developed by progressive tribal government. Again, the whole priority of the colonial government was to create native indigenous leadership that's hooked into the white man's system. So we have our own struggle, I cannot deny that. How do we change that? Because the government turned down adopting and implementing the fundamental principles of the Diné people. It's a foundation. When we as IEN wrote the principles of indigenous just transition, I looked at that document. I looked at the teachings of the Haudenosaunee peoples, some of our teachings with the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota peoples within the traditions of the principles of good living, the Anishinaabe people and their 8 principles. So we have this foundation of teachings that are part of just transition. So how do we change this and make a transition? It's the youth. It's the youth. Because they're the ones looking for answers. I was a youth once. I was on that line. We were fighting. I was a little bit different at the time. I didn't have any compassion. I was a member of the American Indian movement. So it's our youth, though. So that's where our answer is to invest and put our energy into the youth of our Native people, to give them these ideas. But we can't tell them as an older generation, you have to do it this way. Is that we give them the options of different things and let them think about it and have ceremony, and they will come up, I feel, they will come up with the right solution. And it's already, we had the Black Mesa Water Coalition, and their work with other circles stopped the coal mining that was going on there. It was over water. So we know that works. And they were able to communicate with the elders in these remote communities who depend on income from the coal-fired power plants. Talk about the contradiction. But when your people are poor, sometimes you really feel there's no other solution. So just transition is very critical to our movement as Black, Indigenous people of color. I understand. But through our work of a lot of organizations here, including Candy, is that we are given information to our communities in struggle so that they know what their options are. And our hope and prayer is don't take those false promises of benefit sharing around these false solutions. Thank you.
Okay, the next question, it must be a burning one because we got 2 versions of the same question. And this is for Raya. So as an attorney, what about all of these legal cases of people suing the state for climate damages? Montana, elsewhere in the United States, internationally. Are these false solutions, or is there any potential there?
I would absolutely not call them false solutions. We won't put these lawsuits in that category. No, I think they have potential. We've seen they come in a lot of different stripes. You have the Montana one, which was the youth, making progress, holding the industry accountable. You have states, you have cities, townships going straight at the fossil fuel industry for their lies and misinformation. I believe California just joined that crew a few days ago. And we also have this international litigation, and that's something, I think we need to continue, and there should be more of.
Thank you. Candy is going to grab the note card. She left in the other room. Okay, so this next question is around fossil fuel infrastructure, as we've been talking about a lot this afternoon. And the question is about how do we actually shut down fossil fuel infrastructure? What does that fight entail?
I can speak briefly in the New York context, in that, part of it, again, is at the end of my talk, is like keeping our eye on the ball, because again and again, the industry will do anything to keep their business model, to keep their profits, and false solutions that are proximate to those, and allow them to double down on those as, to keep their future the way they want to see their future. So in New York State, we went through this entire process of having a just transition working group, a climate justice working group, go through all of the inventory of New York State's fossil fuel plants and identify which ones need to retire, when. We know that we are closing our peaker plants, the smallest and dirtiest plants in New York State, by law are going to need to close. And so we have done the process of doing that and recommended, what are the funds we're going to need for that just transition piece to make sure that communities, cities, towns, neighborhoods are not left behind. And that means looking comprehensively at, what is their tax base? What will this change do to their schools? We've done this work in New York State. And what we are seeing raw politics and the fossil fuel industry push back with all their might to change our law, to slow it down, to instead put in false solutions instead of actually shutting down the plants and dismantling the infrastructure. We have to keep it means we have to keep our eye on the ball and not go for any distractions, and enforce and fight to hold the line against false solutions and implement in New York State, our climate law, so we can see these plants close.
All right, thank you. And as always, we never have enough time. We got most of the questions, and we are going to end with this question. Each speaker, 1 minute. Starting with you on the end there, Baganga. What are your favorite examples of effective regeneration or infrastructure that enables regeneration?
My favorite? I have to pick one.
Examples.
I feel like a lot of the times we're having to speak out against false solutions, and so it's always good to try to think about this question. And I think about our friend Gopal and his involvement in intentional communities. And I really, even in my dreams, I've had visions of when people are so without resource that fruit is rotting off of the shelves of the stores because they can't afford to buy them. So dreams, I had these visions, but then I also saw this undercurrent of community and people who were taking care of each other. There were like factions of people who were taking care of people who were taking care of children. And I truly believe and know that it's going to be in relationship and community that's going to help us move forward.
I say that's really beautiful, and nothing brings me more joy than children dancing. Nothing brings me more joy than when the young people get the opportunity to, learn about regeneration, learn about the environment and climate, and are empowered to do that in their schools, in their neighborhoods. So that would be, we need to have, environmental education, environmental and climate justice education. And let the young people do what they do. That would be my favorite if you ask me for my favorite.
Well, I don't know why I should be asking such a complex question at this time. But what really what gives me joy is when I see people stand together in resistance. Because and also not being cowed down when people say, you say no all the time, what is your solution? And I believe that saying no is a solution. Because if we don't say no, you're not going to find any solution. So never be afraid to say no, and don't back down when you say no. That's what has given the Yasulinos success in Ecuador, to vote against extracting oil when everybody's looking for petrodollars. That's what has kept the Ogoni people from allowing Shell and Nigerian government from reopening the oil wells since 1993. Saying no is a powerful force.
Real quick, when he said to say no, with our indigenous movement in the North and South, we've really been fighting for recognition of the principles and standards of free, prior, and informed consent. To give our consent is the right to say no to development. The other piece is that regenerative reminds me of a document that was created by many of our community organizations and networks, alliances called the regenerative, the people's regenerative, the people's orientation for a regenerative economy. It's a regenerative economy to move us politically in this government, in this country, away from a death economy to a living economy, away from an extractive economy to a regenerative living economy. You can Google search that. It's a platform that was developed by indigenous, Black, and people of color, communities in struggle. It's still there. That was our definition of Green New Deal. And also on our IEN website, we have the indigenous principles of just transition, which we went through, which is our version of what we're fighting for as far as a regenerative economy, our own economy as indigenous peoples, our just transition. Thank you.
And Margaret.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So the People's Orientation to a Regenerative Economy, you can find that online, search that. And final shout out for the Just Transition Primer, which kind of brought us here initially together today with the New School. So also thank you to the New School for all of your work helping to convene us in this beautiful space.
Come up here, Leo. We need you. And let's give a shout out again to our wonderful panelists, everybody. Let's stand up, move your blood, circulate your blood. Wonderful, wonderful panel. Shout out. Woo! Let's give a shout out to our beautiful audience here, to everyone online around the world listening. Clap your hands for each other. Louder, come on. Woo!
Hi. And then, as an organization grounded in feminist principles, we have so much respect for all of the care work that happens, all of the background work, all of the tech work, everyone who cleans this room. Shout out to those folks.
Yes. We want to ask our comrade, Jaron Brown, to come up here because we want to give a shout out to somebody who helped me to organize and didn't want to come up here. Shout out for Jaron. Come on. He has a look on his face like, why are you doing this to me? Jared knows I'm gonna do this to him. We've been working hard for the past little while, and just making sure everybody here and Leo and everybody else. Now Leo's going to do an interpretive dance. Kidding.
If I get to say one thing, it's such an incredible honor when we're in these. There's so many folks in this room who've been in this struggle for such a long time. So please, when you're here, kick it with us at this social. Get to know. This is like the folks you are building with here, you're going to keep building with, because we've been in this struggle for a long time. These are the relationships we rely on. We're coming back tomorrow. We got a teach-in tomorrow. We want to make sure, bring your friends with you, because we're in a movement building process with each other. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jaren, with
So
Grassroots Global
I'm
Justice.
going to sing this song. It's a celebration song. It's after this song, you can just leave. But it's a celebration song. That's the way I'm going to sing it, to bring and lift up our spirit around love and compassion in the struggle that we have. Hey, 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 hey. Way ya, way yo, hey, 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 way, hey, 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 yo, 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 way ya, way yo, hey, 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 yo, way ya, hey, 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 way, hey, hey, yo, yo, way yo, hey. Thank you. Witakia Owasi.
Now, Leo will give some instructions on where do you go from here this evening. So, Leo, please.
Thanks, Candy. I'm actually going to do interpretive dance now. No, kidding. Woo! Okay, so first, once again, I wanted to say something on behalf of the New School really quickly. The universities have been a space for colonialism and have been instruments of colonialism for a long time. And it's about time we reclaim those spaces and center the voices of frontline, grassroots, indigenous, Black, people of color. So we invite you to please join us tomorrow to continue this gathering as we continue to advance the people's agenda for climate justice against false solutions. I also want to invite folks to please grab some of the Hoodwinked in the Hot House pamphlets that are out there in the table. Please check them out. Woo! Thanks, Benanga. Thanks, Raya. Thanks, Claudiane. Thanks, Nemo. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Callie. Thanks, Candy and Margaret. And certainly thanks, Sage, for that beautiful spiritual grounding. Oh, we need a volunteer to please take this glass of water and pour it outside on the ground as an offering to Mother Earth. Also, okay, so we have a social mingling space. I prompt everybody to make sure you grab your rest wristband so that you can go into the university space. You're going to walk out the auditorium, take a left, and then another left into the building. As you walk down a few stairs, there's just like 3 or 4 stairs, you'll see an open air courtyard. I hope the rain has stopped. If it hasn't, then we also have the cafe that's across the courtyard. There's some food from the amazing folks of La Morada at the Bronx.
Shout out for La Morada.
Shout out for La Morada is a diasporic indigenous kitchen and restaurant from Oaxaca. They do mutual aid. They've been doing mutual aid with communities for a long time. Check out some of their food. Please stay us and have a great time.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Good